Jesus, you love me too much. Oh, oh. Too much, oh, excess love. Jesus, you love me too much. Oh, oh, oh. You love me. You love me. I cannot say why. Yes, you love me. Jesus, you love me too much. Oh, too much, oh, excess love.
The second thing is that we are on social media.
Oh,
that resonates with you, say amen. Snap your fingers. You can shout. You say, all right, girl. All right, I don't know what I said, but okay, I take that. I'll accept it. But really respond. Okay, we're here.
oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I'm found, reason I deny. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, finds till I'm found, reason I deny. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself. Say, love and great examples to us all. In addition to pastoring, Pastor Wale is an IT manager and an amazing chef. Pastor Yemisi is also a manager in her work as well as one of the partners at Master Plan Events. They are also the parents of two amazing twin toddlers, Tade and Bade, so please join me in welcoming them. Next are Mark and Brittney McKinnon. Yes. That's a great applause. Thank you. So Mark and Brittney McKinnon are two newlywed individuals on fire for God. With a powerful online presence, these two entrepreneurs use their platforms to help couples and singles on a daily basis embrace patience, love, faith, and purity in their relationships, and to encourage everyone to always have a personal relationship with God. Mark McKinnon serves as a full-time acting coach and professional actor who's been featured on primetime television shows such as Blue Bloods, FBI and Gotham, and Brittney serves as the CEO and founder of B. Carter Solutions, an award-winning digital marketing agency here in the DMV. Yes. Their love story is a journey and testament of showing the world what can happen if you trust in God and lead the way, remain obedient even when times get tough, and most importantly, understand the power of
to connect and find
Please join me in
inspiration
welcoming them.
in new places. Leading
Welcome, happy homecoming, fellow buddies. You know, we're here, we're the only ones. Everyone else is at tailgate. So, of course, we want to utilize our time well, so we want to jump right into it. And of course, we want to first start with our mantra. As Faye mentioned, we have a few mantras that we'll be using today to get us in the proper mindset and the headspace of what we'll be talking about. So let's open our booklets to the second page for the next mantra. Your love was never far. So when you're ready, we'll read it together.
and look at their profile to see how they look. So I was like, okay, he got a cute little beard, So I was like, hey, here's my email. I would love to hear more about, what event you got going on. Come to find out, this Negro had no event. Ain't no
We
event.
actually did have an event.
Didn't have no event, but it was so crazy, like how God works. So I went back to work. So I gave him my email. We just started to be in constant communication, just started conversing, just getting to know each other a little better. I was talking to somebody, he was talking to somebody. So we just became friends. And ironically, once I got back to work, my full-time job, I was working at a charter school, a coworker of mine came up to me and she was like, hey, Brittney, like, are you currently seeing anyone? I was like, sis, why? I got like 1 or 2 on my roster, like, why? And she was like, I got this nice young man. Mind you, I had not spoken to her about Mark or anything. She said, I got this nice young man at my church. He's light-skinned. He got some big arms. I'm like, okay, Ms. Brunko, what you got going on? And she was like, I want to introduce you to this young man named Mark. And I was like, what church do you go to? She's like, I go to City of Praise. I was like, wow, like I'm actually like getting to know him at this moment. So when I went back to share with him, I was like, I have a coworker. She had no idea that we were conversing or like getting to know each other, and she literally already tried to hook us up. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, this man just called to be my husband. Like he called to be something. And so from then, we just literally started courting, started courting, and then started actually dating. Mark was actually celibate for 4 whole years prior to meeting me, and I was not. I just put it out there. I was not. And so literally just meeting him and just like really seeing who he is and how he wanted to live just kind of really inspired me to actually want to change, because I was a little promiscuous. I was out there, and just honestly meeting him and seeing his lifestyle, I really just fell into that, and I really wanted to change, just to be a better person, because I know that is what God has ordained for us. That's my little big spiel.
And yes, I actually was planning an event. I was helping with a youth ministry at my church. And I didn't like slide in her messages on a slick way. Like I authentically was trying to seek her help. I authentically was trying to get her to come speak to the young women at my church, because I understood what she was doing publicly on her page, how she was inspiring everybody. So I simply asked her, hey, are you available for this event? But yes, everything she says true about just our journey. I will say the first year was like amazing. It was like no arguments. There was no like misunderstandings. We was on the same page, both on fire for God. But once we got to year number 2, this is when we start seeing some things where we were like, oh.
Some things that we didn't know. And I always tell people, like, try to make it through all 4 seasons. Like, I know we'd be so excited to jump into these relationships, and after month 2, I'm all in love and I'm excited, but really try to get to know a person all through 4 seasons, because they will change. They will sincerely change.
Those are great points, thank you. Pastor Wale, Pastor Yemisi, we see your beautiful relationship and marriage every week, every Sunday, if not maybe every day. And as business people, we see the end result to the finished product. So we see the end result, that is your marriage. So okay, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you knew each other were the one.
Great question. There are 2 sides to this story. There's my side, and then there's her side.
And my side is the truth, but go ahead.
So we had, I used to be part of the young adults ministry at church, still am, but they had a singles ministry which was separate from the young adults ministry, and there was a commercial that came on for one event that they wanted to do.
They can't hear you.
They can't hear me, oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? All right. So there was an event that they were promoting called Feel the Fire, right? Is that the name? And I was sitting upstairs in the sanctuary. It was on a Thanksgiving Sunday. I was sitting right next to my best friend, and she came on screen, and she was the one doing the announcements. And I remember turning to him like, wow, who's that? Like, I've got to know this lady. So I took down the notes for the event that they were having, and I went to that event, and to my surprise, she wasn't there. So I'm walking around the event, people are greeting me, but I had a mission. I was looking for someone. So I went to the first event, she wasn't there. I went to the second event, she wasn't there. The third one, she wasn't there at the point I just gave up. So fast forward about a year later, my pastor at that time said, you need to take foundation class, which is something we do in church. For new Christians, they put you through a foundation class where you learn about the Bible and a whole bunch of things. And I've been at the church for some time, but I never took the class. So he mandated me to go take the class. So I walk into the class, and who do I see sitting here taking this class? It's this lady I've been looking for all along. So the class was full, but there was a seat right next to her, and she just like waved to me like,
That part is a lie. I need a working mic.
So she told me to sit right next to her, and I sat next to her, and I didn't bring my Bible to the class that day, and they asked us to open our Bible, and she just slid her Bible right next to me.
Okay, so I'm gonna take over now. That is not what happened. Everything prior to is the truth, and then I'll start from when he came into the class. He came into the class. I was seated by myself. There did happen to be a chair next to me that was empty, and he was like, can I sit there? And I was like, yeah, go ahead, sit in the chair. He was grinning from ear to ear. I mean, it was almost like he saw an angel. I remember calling my sister and telling her like, oh, this young boy just entered the class, and he just seemed overwhelmed with joy. And I think I want to mentor him because I think he needs some guidance. I had seen him in church before, but I thought he was much younger because he was in a lot of ministries where they were jumping off poles and just doing all kinds of stuff. And I told my sister, I think I want to mentor him. And she was like, oh, how old is he? And I said, maybe 21, 22, but I think I'll get to know him a little bit better. So we did take the class together. He wanted to tutor me on the Bible. So a lot of times we were studying together to pass, because in foundation class there's a test you have to pass. And after you pass the test, you can become a worker. So we were studying together. We got to know each other a little bit better. I found out that he wasn't a young child, and he just had a baby face. And we just started spending time with each other. We were quickly attracted to one another. Well, he was attracted to me from the beginning, but we were attracted to one another for a while. But because we had both come out of very difficult relationships, we wanted to take our time. So we were friends for about a year, and then we started dating for a year, courting for a year. He proposed to me on our 1-year anniversary, and then we got married 10 months after. That's the short version, but thank you.
Thank you. We definitely see the full picture now. So back to the McKinnons. Mark, we mentioned that you were living a chaste lifestyle before Brittney came along and changed your life. And of course, Brittney, you were kind of falling into his lifestyle and you're loving it, right? So for you, how was it for you, what's the word? Avoiding temptation, rather, prior to marriage? And of course, for you on the other side, walking into something new, how were you able to keep the dating life spicy and interesting while kind of following this new chaste lifestyle?
All right, yeah, for me, it wasn't an easy road, but one of the things I had to stop doing was putting confidence in my flesh. Like, every time I would put confidence in my flesh, I would fail every single time. And what I mean by that is I can go over somebody's place at a certain hour and tell myself nothing's going to happen, and then something would happen. Or I would say, hey, I'm not going to text this person, but I do text them. So what I tried to do is make sure I avoid the triggers, avoid the things that would really make me fall. And that's how I helped myself for 4 years. It was a 4-year journey. And I don't want to call it just a spiritual journey because that's what guided it, but it was just a personal thing for myself that I wanted to prove to myself and no one else that I can actually do this, that I can abstain from sex. And so even when I started being with Brittney and started talking to her, I shared that with her from the beginning. And she took that and she honored it and she helped me as I continued to build.
We didn't honor it in the beginning. I just want to make that clear. We were having sex in the beginning,
right.
So I want to make that clear. We didn't honor it. But once we kind of got to a place where, all right, we know we need to do it, then we got right. So
agree, yes, agree, yes, agree.
And what was that place that you felt like you needed to do it?
So for us, I mean, we literally, the moment we started dating, it was like we were having sex. And I felt so bad because I literally came in, I really felt bad on myself because he had been celibate for 4 years That's a really hard place, y'all. And I came in, this little promiscuous girl, like, and really messed up his walk. And God was like, I'm really going to get you for that, because, like, he was so strong, and I felt so bad, and, you know, I know I've been forgiven from it, but I literally wrote in my journal, I said, God, you have to help me, because, like, I have been in a place of just being promiscuous, and I was tired. I was tired of just always having sex. And I'm like, God, I wrote in my journal, I said, God, you have to either change my heart, change my mind, whatever you need to do for me to stop, I need for you to do that, because I cannot be the reason why this man is falling. I can't. Like, I want you to remove me from his life if I can't get it together, because that doesn't make any sense. And so literally, thank you, when I wrote that in my journal, he saw it. He claimed that it fell on the floor.
She had it open on the living room table. She wanted me to see that.
I definitely did. He claimed my journal fell on the floor with the page directly open to that direct entry. And then I remember one Sunday after church, he literally pulled me to the side and he actually wrote me a declaration. And he said that from now on, we are literally going to stop. And if I can't be the man to lead you, then we don't even need to be in this relationship together. And so once he made that declaration, I got it in my journal to this day, and he signed it. And he was like, we're not going to have sex until I make you my wife. And so something so important for me is that, like, if you're not in a place that you're going to be with somebody and make them fall, then you need to remove yourself automatically, you know, because I really beat myself up because he was so strong in his celibacy journey. And, you know, I came in and I messed that up, but God also had to show me something that I was still hurting from, something to bring that into this relationship. So I had to fix myself first. And that's something I think as singles that we should be working on right now, is fixing what's wrong with us. Because you don't need to bring that baggage to somebody who was great and whole and on their walk, but here you come messing it up.
And one of the things around that same time when I did find that journal entry, my bishop had just preached a sermon about loving someone. And one of the things he mentioned was love also means you're helping to protect them from their struggles. And I understood that for Brittney, that was a struggle in her life when it came to sex. And so that's what inspired me to say, if I really love her, I want to protect her from that struggle. And that's what really gave us the strength to push through it.
Especially with journaling, entry, and reminding yourselves that you are whole as one, and of course, that's really differentiated between love and lust.
Yes.
So do you think that was the final factor for you? You realized you really loved this person, it wasn't just lust?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I knew that I loved his whole being, him as a person. It wasn't about his looks or how much money he made, because when we were dating, we both didn't have no money. So I definitely knew it wasn't about that, but it was that I genuinely loved his character. Like, my husband is identically to me just like Christ. You know, Mark rarely gets mad. Mark rarely will get an attitude. I've been with Mark 6 years. I have maybe seen him once kind of get an attitude. Like, he was just a replica of Christ. And I needed that. He was somebody who I needed, not someone who I wanted. And I think a lot of times as singles, while we're dating, we fall into these guys of who we want because he's cool or he makes 6 figures, but that wasn't the case that I wanted. That was what I was previously doing. And I knew that's not someone that I needed. God brought me him because I needed him, not because I wanted him. I needed him. I needed someone to help me look in the underlying self for myself. I had deep-rooted issues that a lot of us have not even come to conclusion with. I had a lot of daddy issues, and I hadn't gotten it fixed. And so I knew that with him and with this relationship, I wanted to make it last because I knew he was my husband. And some things that we did, to go back to your question, being abstinent, it's really tough. It really is tough. So what I did was I made sure I didn't wear clothing that was, you know, going to turn him on. He's a man. Like, he's going to look. So I made sure that I didn't wear, like, tight clothes. I remember going through my closet and just purging it. Like, those clothes, those club dresses, those shirts that show all the cleavage. I threw all of that out. Because if I'm in now a spiritual walk with my soon-to-be husband, I shouldn't be tempting him. You know, so we would still hang out. It's so much other things that you can do, you know, when you're abstinent. It's so many other things that we would be at my apartment, playing trouble. You know, like going to the park. You know, it's more than just a sexual journey. Where's the spiritual intimacy? You know, emotional intimacy. It's so much other things you can do besides sex. Yes, sex is amazing once you get married, but it's so much other things you can do and still be on an abstinent journey.
Thank you. That was great. relationships with unpacked traumas, unhealthy habits, in proper form to dating, basically. We're not looking for the right things in a partner. So for Pastor Yemisi, Pastor Wale, what advice do you have for the millennium in terms of finding the proper form when dating as a male, as a female, and looking for those key aspects in a partner?
I think one of the things and I think, I don't want to piggyback, but Brittney mentioned it was dealing with your baggages, dealing with your issues as a single person. I think there's this misconception of, this is my better half, other half, no. What the Bible says is two whole people come together and form one. So it's not a half person, it's a whole person. So in your singleness, in that space you're in, it's learning to deal with your issues, making sure I have my dad's issues checked, my mom issues checked. I'm dealing with my career. What's my career like? Not to try and be so all spiritual, but one of the things that happened in Genesis was when God saw that Adam was doing what he had made him to do, then he said, it's not good for this guy to be alone. I need to send him someone to help him. But he was doing something. So in that space you're in, it's to discover who you are, discover your passions, your gifts, your talents, and spend that time developing that person. And when you do, then you can make the right partner for the person that you're waiting for. One of the things Andy Stanley says is that be the person you're looking for. So if you're looking for a person who's debt-free, or a person who's discovered themselves, no, you be that person. When you be that person, then you can find that person.
And I think as a woman, just like everyone has said here, to position yourself to be found. It's important that a man finds you. And I'm not saying that everyone has to be on a promo ad like I was, but be busy doing God's work. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was busy doing God's work. I knew I was a hot girl. I knew I was well put together, and I knew he was gonna find me. But I had to be doing God's work. It's not enough just to be pretty. It's not enough to just put yourself together well. But what are you doing so that you can be discovered? I think that, a lot of times singles don't get it right, and I didn't get it right every time as well. But one of the mistakes we've made is, just searching and looking and looking for him. He didn't call us to look for him. He called him to look for us. But you have to position yourself so that you can be found. You can't stay in the house all day Netflixing and chilling and expect him to come knocking at your door with a dozen roses, right? You need to be out there. You need to position yourself. You need to make sure that, you're going to places where the kind of man you want to be with, or God has called you to be with, is at. If you want somebody who's clubbing all day, every day, you're going to find them at the club. If you want somebody who has a dedicated relationship with Christ and is walking in the Lord and is doing things that just, promotes Christ-like living, you'll probably find him in the church. Now, the church is not the only place you can find, men of God. I'm not saying that because obviously they found each other.
On Instagram.
On Instagram. And I will say, I just want to note this because I know Brittney and Mark very well. Extremely well.
Yes,
I spent a lot of time with them, and this is not a couple that is going to say something that is not true to who they are. Everything she said about Mark is true. His demeanor is always positive. Same thing with Brittney. What she says is what she is. What she says is what she is. She says who she is, and that's her truth. But the one thing that I think that's, evident about the two of them is they both walk in their truth, and they're not ashamed of who they are. And that's something I've always admired about this couple. But just being who you are, being confident in who you are, and putting yourself in a position where you can be found.
McKinnon, do you want to add anything to that?
Go ahead, go. Go for it.
Basically, the question was the positioning and how you could set yourself up as a millennial for a successful relationship.
Well, one advice I'd like to give is pretty much, we think we know what we want in a relationship, but it's very hard to know what you want in a relationship if you're struggling with understanding your purpose. When you're able to get to a place where you understand the direction that God is pushing you, the direction that God is pushing you in your career, in your friendship goals, when you understand those things, when he put you in a place with the city you're supposed to be in, the state you're supposed to be in, God will start to show you those people who are supposed to be in your life. And so I highly advise you that you get to a place where you really start attacking your purpose, understanding who you are so that you know who needs to be in your life and who shouldn't be there.
I actually don't have anything on that one. Yeah, I think y'all kind of took it away.
So we mentioned there are going to be a lot of tough conversations prior to marriage and, of course, during marriage. Not all the conversations are necessarily pillow talk, specifically financials and sex. So how do you have those tough conversations, and when is the appropriate time to start having those conversations in the realm of those or even other traumas or unhealthy habits?
Well, I know one of the biggest things that we struggled with in the beginning when it came to the tough conversation was not doing it in love. And whenever we were having a tough conversation, we were attacking one another rather than really listening to one another. So when we worked on that, we had got advice to start speaking in love and stop pointing a finger, but pointing it back at yourself, understanding where can I do better. That's when we really got deep and deeper into the tough conversations.
Yeah. And I also would say that, like, marriage is for the mature. Please don't jump into a marriage if you're not mature. You know, if you got so much things that you got to handle in this single season, get that before you enter into a marriage. I was very immature when it came to communication and expressing my feelings. I'm a firecracker. I have been independent since like 12 years old, working since 12 years old. So it was tough for me to come into a marriage and really kind of take direction, because sometimes as women, we're so powerful and we do a lot on our own. So just to kind of come in and just kind of take direction, I love submitting to my husband. I don't think it's an issue at all. But that was a challenge for me because I have been so used to just taking care of people and leading and just being a leader. And so it was kind of tough for me. But what he said was completely true. Like, it's the way you say it, you know. And if you're mature, if you're frustrated, because finances will get you frustrated, it's a way to say it without hurting the other person's feelings. You know, when you're entering into a marriage, even a relationship, you got to know to be selfless. I was very selfish as a single. I always was just me. But whenever you're entering into a marriage, you know, all that goes out the window. Like, your husband's needs should become before yours. You know, you're in a marriage to serve. I'm in a marriage to serve my husband. Anything that he has going on, I am his biggest supporter, because Sister Susie will not be. So you got to make sure that you are his biggest supporter. And I think a lot of times that we forget that sometimes, but that selfishness needs to go out the window, and you have to learn to be selfless. I don't know if that answered the question, though. Oh, okay.
Well, the great answers. The conversation about finances and, of course, sex. Now, we were privileged or fortunate not to have sex before we got married. And it was because we were coming out of relationships that we were heavy into. So when we found this new thing, we just decided it's, in order not to mess this up, and I think she has a different revelation she got from it before we got into the relationship. But I don't even think we mentioned it. It just, I think I tried a couple of times and you just said no. But the financial, for me, that was the toughest part. Because when she met me, I mean, I hadn't finished school. My finances were, I couldn't even get a cell phone in my name. That's how bad it was. I mean, I'll walk past a bank and I'll trip the alarm. But it was really that bad. And it was hard for me to have that conversation with her, but I was in a place in my life where I was just broken, beaten, and I was just there, and I was trying to build myself back up. So meeting her kind of pushed me to start, hey, I got to finish school. So I finished school. I started to get my finances back. When we eventually got married, she was making double my salary. Now, for a man, that's a tough place to be. But fast forward years later, now I'm making double her salary. But it was a tough conversation to have in the beginning, but I had to come out and be honest, like, hey, this is how much I make. My credit is jacked up. This is what it is. And we took a class together before we got married called Financial Peace University, which I recommend for couples. So we took that class, and that helped us realize what things that we needed to do. So it was just being honest and saying, but I didn't have it just when we met. You have to know this is the person you're going to get married to before you start having those conversations, because you don't want to have Sister Jackie, Sister this, everybody knows, oh, no, that guy's credit is... you have to wait to make sure it's the right person, and if it's the right person, they'll help you get out of that. They'll help you meet where God wants you to get to.
So my story, my sexual journey is a little bit different. Like he said, we did not have sex before we got married, but I didn't come into the marriage as a virgin. I did, date someone, and we were heavily, actively doing things we weren't supposed to do. And I actually attended a conference in Chicago called Sexualizing Your Soul. And our pastor put it on, Pastor Gandhi. He wasn't my pastor at the time. I lived in Chicago, but the conference was just coming to Chicago. And it was very, very obvious that the lifestyle that I was living with this one person had to change. And of course, he wasn't down for it, and that's okay because he was crazy anyway. So I cut that rope and let him go. But, it's a conversation that, like he said, by the time he met me, I already had my mind made up. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I listened to the tapes. There were tapes back then. That's how long ago Sexualizing Your Soul was. Listened to the tapes a couple of times, and I got the conviction that, I was brought up in the church. I knew what I was supposed to do. I met somebody, I went astray, but now I'm coming back. And I don't care who's coming my way, they are not gonna take me off of track. Now, because he's a man, and most men try to push the limits. I think with him, because he knew that it was a no-go zone, and I had to let him know that I am not sleeping with anyone else unless if it's my husband. And that's after we get married. Not, some people have, oh, he's gonna be my husband, we're gonna get married anyway. No. We have to go to court, go to the church, do whatever we have to do. I need a ring on my finger. I need people to be present for us to say we are married. And then we can go into sexual activities. I think one of the challenges with talking to people about your sexual journey or where you're at is just making sure you're mature enough to handle what the response is going to be. Because not everybody is going to be on board. And that was a truth that I discovered shortly after the bad relationship I was with. I started dating someone else, and I was having these conversations with him, and of course he was like, okay, like they all do, but still try to, wiggle his way in. I sent him 2 copies of the tapes just so, he had one in case he lost the other one. This guy wasn't getting it, and I was like, okay, this is not happening. I like you as a person, you're great, but we can't move on. With my wonderful husband, all it took was me to look at him sideways once, and it was a done deal because he knew I was serious. I'm trying to secure my future. Likewise, he was as well, but I think I was more convicted than he was. And I'm not saying women, it's easier for us to be more convicted, but men struggle sometimes. Sometimes they get it, but sometimes they don't. And I felt like my role was to make sure through this journey that we're taking, we are gonna make sure we're staying on track, which is why we only dated for a year before we got engaged. That's one of the reasons why. I think that was one of the reasons why. But on a serious note, we kind of just knew. After that look, we knew that this wasn't it. So it was a little bit more comfortable us talking about things when he already knew where I stood on it. And I'm a very strong, persistent, stubborn person.
Mm-hmm.
So once my mind is made up about something, it's very difficult to change it. As far as finances go, I was very comfortable with how I lived by myself for a very long time. So I would manage my household pretty well. He wasn't there yet, but he had potential. And that's the one thing I want to point out. It's rare for you to find a 6-foot handsome man that got it all together, that's making 6 figures, and that's willing to be teachable. So a lot of times it's important to see the potential in someone. Amen. He had so much potential. And I just think that he just needed to be guided to where he needs to be. And my prayer was always, Lord, I know I'm making double what he's making now, but I need him to make double what I'm making. Because it builds up his confidence. You know, when we were married, it was never an issue. No one knew who made more money. No one needs to know, right? You're my husband, we're one. So I never hung it over his head that I'm making double. That was never a conversation we had. If I agreed to marry you, I'm taking all of you. But my prayer was, Lord, work this out. Because I want him to be confident in knowing that I am the breadwinner of this family. And I think that's what helped us. We took FPU, we talked to our mentors, we had to change our spending habits, we had to live in a one-bedroom apartment for a while. We had to do some things that helped us manage our finances better. And now I thank God for where we are, and I know where we're going is still far, but I saw potential in him, and I'm still seeing potential, and I know he's gonna be making triple, quadruple more than what I'm making, and I'm okay with that.
That's so good.
Want to add to that, Brittney?
I actually do, because we actually have a similar situation. When we were dating, the same way. I was pretty comfortable living by myself. And Mark wasn't there yet. However, I literally saw this man trying, because he's a full-time actor, and we know as an artist, we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what that income looks like. Basically, like an entrepreneur. But at that time, I actually had a full-time job, but he had so much potential, and I saw so much passion from what he was trying to do. And he was just like, if you stick with me, like, I know we're going to go far. And even to this day, I have the same, almost identical prayer. Like, Lord, I know you see this work we putting in, but I do want my house in LA on the water in Malibu, and we're going to get that house in LA.
Amen.
But I saw his potential, and I saw how hard. It's a difference from dating someone and you don't see them doing anything, no potential. They don't even want to get off the couch. They don't want a job. Opposed to someone, if they're not making that much, but you're actually pushing them. You know, pushing them to go and, hey, I think you should open up an acting school. I think you should do this. You know, it's about, like Yemisi said, coming together as one. You know, you're not just 50-50, like it's 100-100. Even in our marriage to this day, a percentage of what I make goes into that joint account, a percentage of what he makes goes into that joint account, and that's our money. It's not, oh, my business money, your business money. It is our money. And finances is the #1 divorce thing. A lot of people don't understand finances and how to get it in order before you actually go into a marriage. We took a whole premarital boot camp to help us. Like, we had to show each other how much is in your bank account today. A lot of people, if you're in the dating season, how comfortable are y'all to even show the person you're dating how much is in your bank account right now? Are you comfortable enough right now to show the person that you're dating your current credit score? We had to do that in our premarital boot camp. But it was because we were getting prepared. And so a lot of times we aren't prepared, but we have to get prepared, especially if you want to enter this journey of marriage.
It was good. And one of the things that good job. That was good. One of the things that I have refused to do was to even engage her, propose to her until I was financially ready to handle the relationship. Because as bad as we wanted to do the 1 year too, we talked about it, joked about it, we would have did 6 months if it was in God's plan. But the thing was, I was like, okay, if something was to happen to her job or her business fell, would I be able to hold things down? And so that's why we dated so long, because I wanted to make sure I was responsible.
Perfect, thank you. So we've already touched a lot of hot topics, but do we have any audience questions right now? Perfect.
Hi.
Hi.
Help. I'm actually gonna.
You're breaking up.
Second. Hello. I'm not sure about the mic. Okay, I'll start. Is it okay with you? Okay. Hi, Brittney.
Hi.
Hi, PYem. Okay, so you guys, not seen. You're very powerful women. I can see there's a little bit of spice in you, Brittney, and there's
Yes,
a little bit of
yes.
power in you, PYem. I wanted to talk about the topic of submission. Conversation that happened online on Instagram where somebody posted something about submission, and she had interesting points, valid to some people not valid. Some people see submission as being subservient, like you're below the next person, and it's like, for you, I die, and for me, I'm nothing. So from your experience, what would you define submission as in a married setting? Because I did ask a lot of married people, and they had very interesting comments.
Awesome. Thank you. I actually love this question. So for me, what I value submission as is me following my husband. And so I always break it down into context. So the word sub means under. So that means I am under my husband, right? And I always say a lot of people freak out when it comes to submission because I don't think they're married to the right person, because that word shouldn't fear you. If you are married and going somewhere and that person is going somewhere, then you should be comfortable with following them. So sub means under. Mission means I know my husband has a mission, and I'm supposed to be a part of that mission. And whatever his mission is, I am going to follow that. And whether that's being a servant to him, whether that is putting my needs behind myself and making sure that I'm following the mission, because the mission is our mission. And so when people sometimes, if they think submission, oh my God, I gotta do what he says, but honestly it's being under somebody who God has called to lead your home. And that person should be following God in the beginning. So I don't have a problem with submission. I love following my husband because I know he's being completely led by God. And I know whatever decision that he's making, I know he has heard from God. Unless it's a little janky and I'm like, okay, are you sure God told you that? Honestly, you'll find that out with the person that you're dating and the person that you actually go into a marriage to. They should be clearly hearing from God and not hearing from flesh. And I know 100% that my husband hears from God, and the way I know that because I see him studying. I see him in his word almost every night. He's a minister, and on top of just being a minister, he's also a great person, and he wants to show us that this marriage, we want to be able to help other people. And so when you hear the word submission, I don't want people to be fearful of it, but I want you to be like, okay, I actually want to serve this person because I want to be a part of their mission. So that's just my stance.
And I think you said it very well, Brittney. And I don't know how exactly you said it. Do you want to repeat your definition of what submission is? You don't remember? Okay. I think it's, being the stronger partner. You want to say it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Being the stronger person and being able to be led by someone else. And I think Brittney hit it on the nail. People who struggle to submit, it's not that they're finding it challenging to submit. They're finding it challenging to submit to that person. Because if you think about it, in our everyday life, we're submitting. We're submitting to our supervisor. We're submitting to the bus driver. We're submitting to the person that's driving the train in the Uber. You're putting your life in that person's hands for that amount of time, right? So submission to me, I'm very traditional when it comes to certain things, and I knew that whoever I married, I had to be able to submit to them. And I knew that he was qualified enough for me to submit to him. And what do I mean by that? He is a man of God, like Brittney mentioned. He's studying the word. This man wakes up at 5 o'clock every day to study the word and pray for our family. So he's not just thinking about him, he's thinking about our family. So why wouldn't I want to submit to him? I know that what he's doing has our family's best interests. Now, if you're with somebody who doesn't care too much for you, it's all about him. You're not number 2, 3, 4, or 5 on his list. You're going to have a challenge submitting to that person because he's not being led by God. He's being led by the flesh, and he's going to respond in a manner that illustrates that he's being led by the flesh. But when you meet that right person and you know his history, his patterns, his goals, his beliefs, no matter how strong you are, you will be willing to submit. Submission also doesn't mean that it depends on your husband. With my husband, it's not everything I say goes. He knows that I'm a helpmeet. I'm here for a reason. And my job is to help you when you get to the edge to kind of bring you back. Like, baby, are you sure? Can we pray about this together? He's very conscious of, babe, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And I'll give him my opinion. At the end of the day, he's going to do what he feels is best for their family. But he always, always, always considers what I tell him. And that's the kind of person I need to be married to. He's not the first person that said he wanted to marry me, but he was the first person that I could submit to. And that's why I was comfortable marrying this man.
And I think I remember what I was going to say, that submission, when God says to submit, that means I feel the woman is stronger than the man. So for God... So for God to give that instruction is to know that you have power that you need to kind of tone down, because you can, and I think I used the analogy of a Ferrari when you're driving a Ferrari. So I'm not saying men should press their women, but what I'm saying is the woman is like a strong Ferrari engine, and the man has been given instructions to use that car to get to his destination. Now, he can decide to try and press it and have an accident or not follow the instructions that it needs, but I think that's what I said, yeah.
Hi, I have a question, just kind of rewinding back to like some of us that may be here now, single. I don't want to project my own insecurity, but I feel sometimes a guy can come to us or we see somebody and it's just like, oh, he's probably talking to someone else. Or a guy can be like, oh, the lady got other guys. So too much of a high expectation for not want them to be talking to anyone. Kind of how do you deal with that? Because it may not be a one-for-one, like we're both have nobody on our line, or just kind of how do you navigate them? Or if they are talking to someone, does he have a week till he cuts it off? Like, how do you kind of work with that?
Does he have what? Could you say that last part again?
Does he have like 1 week to cut off everyone else?
Cut it off.
Yeah, like what is that? How do we navigate with that? Because sometimes I feel maybe I just fall into the assumption the church guy is talking to other women or just something like that.
Yeah. So I think that that is an okay assumption to have, but I don't think that's a negative thing. You know, when we first met and we were befriending each other, you know, I knew he had other people talking. He was talking to other people. And of course, there were other people talking to me. Who wouldn't want to be with a hot girl, right? So but I think that once we got to a place where we knew we wanted to be into a committed relationship, you know, we had to start letting other people go. No one wants to be with somebody that don't nobody else want, right? It's okay if they have other people they're talking to. You need to know if you're comfortable with that. When you get to a point where you want it to be just you and me, you should be comfortable articulating that to the person you're dating or seeing. And if they're not ready to be with only you, that's when you have to make the decision. Do I want to continue this journey with this guy that's talking to 10 other people? Or do I need to help him understand why I'm the best candidate from the rest of the women that he's talking to? So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because, you know, everyone wants, someone told me that men marry the best option. They always marry the best. It's not that they don't have other options, but they marry the best option for them. So the chances of a guy that you meet that you like is talking to somebody else is very high, especially if he's an attractive guy, he has his life put together. The chances of him talking to other people is gonna be high. You just need to figure out how you stand out amongst the rest and discover or determine when that breaking point needs to happen. For some people, it happens sooner than later, but for others, it doesn't. But I don't think that's negative, you know, a negative thing.
Can I add to that question? Because you did bring up a good point about insecurities, and sometimes, like you mentioned, it might be financials, but there's some reasons that we count ourselves out and deem ourselves unworthy. Do you ever feel as though you had those situations going into dating, aside from being a hot girl? What other insecurities that made you felt like, you said, Pastor Wale, in the past, that you felt like you weren't ready for that relationship? Insecurities.
Well, I mean, mine was the reverse. Like, I didn't think I was good enough for Brittney when I first met her. I understood what she was doing in her life, and I knew where I was financially. And so that's why I wanted to be her friend first, because it was like, I'm not ready to date her. And so I'll also say this, too, just going back to the first point, that if you are being friends first, it's going to be natural for the guy to have other friends. And the worst thing you can do is try to force him to cut off people. Because if you force him to cut off people, he more than likely is going to want to go back to them or at least keep that conversation going because there was no closure, all right? And so when that guy knows that that's the woman that God has for him, he's going to naturally cut off people, all right? So you have to give that time. So if you are friends and during that friendship period, he starts to realize that you're the one for him, he's going to naturally do it, and you're not going to have to ask him. You're going to have to expect it or anything.
So I want to speak to the insecurity part. I was really insecure for a long time. My teeth was jacked up. I never thought I was pretty. I used to always wear eyelashes. I said, wear eyelashes today. But I just never thought that I was pretty. And it was crazy because people were like, oh my gosh, online you got it all together and boom, boom, bam. But internally, I was really, really broken and just from just having this promiscuous life from college. And when I got to therapy, I really had to find that root of where that insecurity came from. And it was because I had an abandonment. My father left me at 3 years old. And, so I felt like I didn't know how to take love. And that was something we suffered when we started dating. Mark used to be like, why are you so angry, girl? Like, why are you always so mad? And I was just so angry because I didn't know how to receive love from a man because I never got that from my father. So that's why I talk about those daddy issues. And, like, if you have those, it's nothing wrong with going to therapy. I still go to therapy every single week. But I really had a big insecurity. I never thought I was pretty. I always thought I had to have on makeup and lashes and lipstick to get a man. And then when he came in, he's like, girl, why you wearing them? And he's still calling, why you still wearing them fans? Like, why you still got them fans on? I love my fans, by the way. But it's a real insecurity that a lot of women have. But until you actually go and cope with it or go to therapy or actually let it out, you're still going to be suffering from it. I knew that I had to talk to somebody about this abandonment. And yes, I am hurt from my dad leaving me. And those daddy issues were a challenge in our marriage and in our relationship. But because I went through the steps and I actually went to therapy and I actually healed from that and I actually forgave this man for leaving me, that helped me be a great wife and that helped us with a healthy marriage today. So I don't know if that answered your question, kind of. Okay.
All right, we have a question from here. Hi, good afternoon. My question is when individuals choose to wait before marriage and when they do get married, like what do they do if the sex is bad?
Good question.
Wait, repeat the last, what's the last?
What would you do?
I said if individuals that choose to wait and once they get married,
That's a
if
good
the
one.
sex is bad, what do they do?
That is a fantastic question. Y'all want me to start? All right, so I can't speak to it because we had sex before, so I knew it was good. But I'm not telling y'all to do that at all. But it's crazy because, like, I also was the same way. And I was like, I want to test the waters because I don't want to be in a marriage and it's not good. But honestly, guys, like, you should be fulfilled in all areas and not just sex. You should be filled spiritually, emotionally, and then that intimacy, physical intimacy. I don't believe that you should get a divorce from your husband if the sex is bad. Because one thing you can do, you can teach him. Amen. You can teach him how you like to be pleased. Amen. You shouldn't get a divorce because the sex is bad. Show him I like this. Show him I like that. I'm pleased this type of way. There are plenty of sexual courses, sexual counseling, but I definitely don't believe that you should go into a marriage and automatically thinking, because you can't think that, oh my God, I haven't had sex with him, and if the sex is bad, I'm not going to love him. You should always keep that positive mindset. And if you get into a marriage and the sex is not good, show him how to be pleased. He might not think you good. And then what? It's like you got to have that open communication. You got to say, you know what, this is how I like to be pleased. I like to be pleased this way. And if it still doesn't work, then go and get counseling. But I definitely wouldn't say, don't go into the marriage thinking, oh my God, if the sex is bad, I got to leave. Like, work on it.
That's good. And the problem with having sex before marriage is that when you do get married, now you're going into the marriage with some expectations of positions and certain pleasures. And it's easier said than done, but you literally have to go with a mental and physical clean slate of what sex means to you. And that's what, as Brittney said, you got to learn it. You got to relearn each other. There's some things we had to learn from each other sexually. It took us a minute. It wasn't like as soon as we started having sex, it was just all heaven, right? It took us a while to relearn each other with pleasure.
That is so true.
Sorry, I'm laughing because so recently it was my birthday and my wife booked a hotel for us in D.C., so we spent the night away from the kids. So in the morning, I'm like, oh, we're going to do it in the shower. And we're in the shower. I'm like, how do these people in the movies do it? Like, it was so unrealistic. But But what I was trying to get to is, the first thing we need to always know is that sex wasn't man's idea. Sex was God's idea. Sex was created by God, and everything God created is good and perfect. So when you get into marriage, and if you've been celibate and you're trying to get into it, now it's going to take patience, just like anything in life. You might get into it and it's awesome from the beginning. No, we had to communicate like, hey, we hadn't been with each other, and she hadn't been for so long. So we had to start talking about it. Like, I think it even took us 3 days before the first time, after we got married, because it just took that much work. But it's patience, and you begin to build. And I think it's something where God wants you to discover as you're going. You're not going to get into the marriage and then you're just all those people you've seen in the movies and stuff. No, it's not going to happen like that. That's Hollywood. The real deal is you're going to start to discover yourself, what she likes, what I like, how she likes to be pleased. And sometimes you have done something for so long, you have to switch it up. Okay, what's the next phase we're going into? So I think with each phase in marriage, it's like it gets better. It's like fine wine, like they say. It gets better, yeah.
That is good. And just to piggyback off that, y'all stop watching these shows and This Is Us and This Is Us. And oh my God, I want that. This Is Us. I love Sterling. Oh my gosh. Like, no, it is completely different. You're going to make your own journey, your own love, your own everything. It's not going to be what you see on TV and social media. You're literally going to make your own rules in your own marriage. And I see it all the time. Everybody, they want these marriage goals that they see on these shows and on social media in Hollywood, opposed to actually making your own marriage and making your own spontaneous things, your own adventures. It's going to be yours. So look forward to actually just making it your own.
And be comfortable talking about it. You're with this person for the rest of your life. You might as well make it work. We have no problem saying, that position was a little bit too much for us, right? You got to be comfortable talking about it. And, I think the more you talk about it, the better it gets. But don't downplay discussion and conversation and foreplay. Sorry, I shouldn't have said foreplay. Foreplay is important, but I don't want people's minds to start going other places. But it's important to talk about it. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to your partner, there's sex counselors out there. People are getting paid to talk about sex. And you have to invest in your sexual relationship to reap the full benefits of it. And this is about the two of you guys becoming one and pleasing each other as one. So that means you're going to have to talk before, during, after. Do what you got to do to make it work and make it your own. So what works for Brittney and Mark might not work for us. And what works for us might not work for other people. You have to discover what works for your marriage. And that takes time.
We have a question here.
Good afternoon. My name is Brittney Y. I have a question around healthy community. Healthy community is important in your singleness, and I'm assuming also in your marriage. So what boundaries or reevaluations did you make around community when you got married?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Okay, so like for example, I'm single now. I might talk to a brother in Christ on the phone after 9, but no later than 10. Or like I've heard sometimes when people are married, they don't like it when their husband's alone in a room with a female counseling them. So those things, like what type of boundaries have you set around community as a marriage couple?
Yeah, me and Brittney, we first got together because like I do private coaching, so and 70% of my clients are women. And so there was some trust issues there in the beginning when we first started dating, where there was people who she just did not trust. Or because I was so used to just texting clients any time of day, even though in my mind it's completely pure and good, in her mind it was like, she sent a smiley face, that means something, right? And so we, we literally had to have that tough talk and conversation where it really did take some time for us to learn new rules and set boundaries. So now I had to learn that I can't text clients after 9:30 p.m., and I have to tell them that. So I have to set boundaries not just within ourselves, but outside of us as well, so that way everyone outside of us understands those rules and boundaries.
And that's good. And also the same with me. I'm also in a profession where I do work with men and I have consultations. And so all of my consultations are going to be at my office. I'm not meeting you for coffee or drinks. Like I'm just not doing that. I'm just not putting myself in that predicament. And the same thing with my husband. He has a whole acting school with beautiful women. However, I know I trust him. Not all women have that same mindset, and that's just gonna be real honest. Not everybody values marriage, and sometimes a lot of single people don't value marriage. And so we made sure, like, okay, email only. You know, I'm not texting a man after 9 p.m. A client of mine, he shouldn't be texting me. You can respond to my email. I'll respond to you in 24, 48 hours. So it's just like putting those boundaries in place and just making sure that communication, that you're all on one accord and one page.
And for us as well, especially I wouldn't say especially for me, but for me, I talk to a lot of young women that come to me for help and counseling. So one of the things I always do is I mention it to my wife. I might not tell her the details of the conversation, but I say, hey, this person reached out to me, was asking about this. This person reached out to me. So for my protection and her protection, I make sure I put it out there. So that way she can always follow up like, hey, whatever happened to that person that wanted to talk to you? So for me, since she knows about it, or sometimes I say, if I'm talking to the lady, I'm like, you know what? I think you should actually talk to her. She's a pastor too, so she might have more insight than I have on this. And it's just a way of setting boundaries. I'm not saying women are out to get me, but I might be weak. David, everyone was going to war. He looked out his window, saw a lady. I was like, hey, I want that lady. So sometimes it's not nothing that you've done. You just have to put certain boundaries in place, like, I'm not going to cross that line. So I have some of my leadership team as well. Anytime a lady comes and I feel I might be weak around this person, I say, hey, talk to this person. I don't think I can do that counseling. Joseph ran. He didn't even have a conversation.
Yeah, so I think the key term is boundaries, and making sure you establish boundaries that you are comfortable with. And for some people, it's easier than others. Like, I don't text any man or woman after 10 o'clock, especially if they're married, because I feel like that's pillow talk time, you know, and I have to respect that. And there have been occasions that I've had friends from my Chicago days call me at like 11 o'clock, which is 10 o'clock their time, and I'm like, okay, you do know I'm married, right? I can't talk. We can talk in the morning. If it's that important, let's talk in the morning. But I'm never going to jeopardize my relationship with my husband, my marriage, my ministry by pushing boundaries or making sure that I'm doing something that he's uncomfortable with. You know, some people, because of their work hours, they can talk to, you know, midnight because they're dealing with clients across the ocean, right? So it depends on what works well for your partner. And like Brittney mentioned earlier, being mature enough to know that, you know, some things you're going to have to cut off. We like to believe that we can still live the same life that we lived when we were single. We can't, because you're no longer single.
And I think she wanted to also find out about being single. How do you create that community, or how do you... Yeah, so some of the things I think Mark mentioned it is no more Netflix and chill. If it's going to be Netflix and chill, let all the windows be open and let it be 9 a.m. in the morning.
Have somebody else there too.
And have somebody else there too. So it's certain things that you know. I was telling my wife the other day, I was watching a show on HBO called, is it Euphoria? I don't know. Okay, yeah. But to me, it just started doing something in me, like, and I had to cut it off. I told my wife, I can't watch this show anymore. I just feel there's certain spirits in it where I haven't masturbated in years, and now I feel like masturbating. I'm like, where's that coming from? So I identified it was the show, so I cut it off. Certain people I have to unfollow on Instagram, because when I start seeing your stories and I'm like, okay, I got to unfollow you. The Bible says, guard your heart with all jealousy, man. So if you don't want to fall, there's certain things you just have to put in place. Yeah.
Absolutely. And plus, like, we're partners. This is my partner, so she has my best interest. So there's been times where she said, Mark, I think you need to watch out for this person. In the beginning of our relationship, I used to get so annoyed with that. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's nothing going on. But then later on, things will come out, and I was like, oh, she was right. You know, so I had to learn to trust her instinct, trust what God put inside of her. That way I'm protected too.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Vanessa. I had two questions. One was this issue of, I've heard you guys both mention the topic of potential, and seeing that you guys both saw potential in each other, and that's how you knew that this would be a good choice for you in regards to choosing a spouse. Whereas like I hear a lot of adults, especially like my mom, she's always like, oh, don't focus on potential. Like potential is never gonna get you anywhere. So my question is there a time constraint on potential? There are a lot of people coming into relationships that have kind of have a past or have been going through things as to why they're where they're at when you meet them. Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it a month? Is it 3 months? How do you know if someone is really going to fully maximize their potential? Because a lot of people have potential, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily end up meeting it. And then the second question was, so I'm like, I'm not a commitment phobe, but I like this whole marriage, like the rest of your life really scares me. And so for me, I don't want to get into, I guess I've kind of been weary in regards to getting into long-term, like a short-term relationship serious relationship, because I don't want it to be like, oh, we're waiting till we're married, so I need to fast-track this, relationship. Like, how do you balance being abstinent, not having sex, but at the same time kind of waiting to see, like you said, all the 4 seasons? Because, I mean, you guys were fortunate enough to kind of date for a year and then 10 months get engaged, but, I mean, in other situations, how do you know, or how you guarantee that getting into that, it's gonna work out in the end?
Well, I would just say that I'm a very big component of the 4 seasons, because I think in a year, you can see the person you're dating go through ups, down, death, promotions. You see so much, but I know that's not everybody's story. For me, that's what I needed. I needed to see how you deal with pain, how you deal with disappointment, and you can't really see that in 2 months, right? The other thing I want to say about the potential is do not belittle the power of prayer. It's so important to pray about these things, even prior to meeting your husband, right? I think as singles, sometimes we wait until that person gets there, and then we're praying about that person. What we should be doing is praying about whoever God is bringing into your life prior to even meeting that person. Prayer will give you the spirit of discernment to knock people out, let people know that this person is being filed in the, if my car breaks down, this is a nice person to call, and this is not my husband category. So he had potential, that's true, but I also prayed about it, and I got confirmation. We didn't talk about this earlier, but when we started dating, I heard a pastor, Pastor Agu, talk about how with his wife, he had confirmation from 3 different people that this is the person God wanted him to marry. So I tapped into that. I said, if God can do that for Pastor Agu, he can definitely do that for me. And I prayed about it. I went to talk to 3 separate people because this was before we started dating. This was when we were still friends. He was interested in me, and another person was interested in me, and they were very different, night and day. I prayed about it. I spoke to 3 people, 2 of which were pastors. One was a minister, but wasn't my pastor. And I laid everything on the table. Each and every time they said it was him. Each and every time. And I kind of felt that, but I needed to be 100% sure, which is why I went into prayer, fasting, and confirmation. And then when we started dating, we both prayed about it. There were times where I remember the first prayer retreat that we had together, we said, we're going to go into this prayer retreat just praying about our relationship. And whatever God tells us to do, that's exactly what we're going to do. So we fasted, we prayed for 3 days. After the prayer retreat, we were like, did you hear? And he said no. And he was like, did you hear? And I said no. And I said, okay, we're still going to pray about it. And eventually we got confirmation that this is where God wanted us to be. God is not a God of confusion. So he's going to tell you the exact same thing he's going to tell the person you're meant to be with. All of this, I prayed to God, he told me you're my wife. If God doesn't tell you he's your husband, he's not your husband. You know what I mean? You have to be diligent about praying about it. You have to be committed to it, because this is a lifetime commitment that you're going into. So you want to make sure it's right. I understand the phobia or the fear of getting into a committed relationship. But I think in this season, you're doing the right things. You're coming to a conference. Start praying about it. Ask God, what do I need to do to work on myself so I don't have anxiety about this? Because if marriage is what you desire, you have to be open for it to come to you. But you can't do that if you're walking in a state of fear or anxiety. Pray about it. God does wonders with prayer. Spending time with him, talking to him about your fears, your desires, you'll see things starting to break down. You'll start to see yourself being open to talking to people a little bit more. So I just want to stress the point of prayer and ask people to join you in prayer. There were several people that were praying about him for me. Several. Because I didn't want to make a mistake. I didn't want to get into something that I knew would backfire. So I called on 3 of my sisters, a couple of pastors, and I said, can we pray about this situation? Because I want to make the right decision. Now, the right decision doesn't mean that the journey is going to be smooth. It just means that this is who God has called you to be with.
And God has something powerful for you, right? Because I'm a firm believer that whatever you fear, that's the direction you're supposed to go. So the more you fear that thing of marriage, the more you know God has something for you. Because the devil's going to do whatever he can to stop you from your purpose of marriage. So just understand, keep attacking it, keep going.
Okay, I think I wanted to. Can I ask one question, or you guys can please? Why is this mic doing this to me now? Why me? Okay, I can go? Okay.
Project.
Okay, so if you guys can expatiate on the comment about dealing with your damages. I think there's a part of being single that we do not understand, that with the season of being single sometimes can mean that God wants you to deal with certain things in your life at that point in time, and he's not letting that person or whomever he's prepared you for to come. Now, how do you handle that season, or how do you stay committed to that season or that process of having to deal with those things? Or how do you know you can get to that point you acknowledge that God is putting you in that season for that purpose, where you have to deal with a lot of baggages you're working with, as opposed to bringing that into a relationship? Because I heard marriage shows you who you really are, or brings out your true colors, and some of our colors we don't want to see it.
I'll go first. So I would definitely say be intentional. Like, be intentional of what you're actually asking God to reveal to you. A lot of times in our seasons of singleness, we want to jump into these relationships. We want these big weddings and these big rings, but we haven't really been intentional about who we are as self. You know, who are you as a person? You know, if I got this horrible attitude right now in a relationship, that attitude is going to go into my marriage until I've actually found that root. So you have to be very intentional about, why am I reacting this way? Why, when a man comes to me, I'm constantly pushing him away? And he could be a good catch. He could be my blessing. But because I'm so fiery and I keep pushing him away, I'm not being intentional of what God has for me. And I'm a firm believer of always having your hands open to receive. It's a reason why we do it in church, not just because it feels good, but your hands should be automatically open to receive what God has for you. And a lot of times we're so closed off, we have so much guard up, and you could be really missing that complete person right in your face. But you have to be intentional, and you have to know what you want. You know, in this season right now of being single, you need to ask yourself, like, what do I really want? What do I really want from a person? What do I really want? And am I in a position to actually receive him or her?
And rightly said. One of the things I used to deal with a lot was I have anger issues. I mean, very bad temper. No one knows because I smile a lot and just cover it up. But once you get into marriage, then you understand how much of an anger issue you have. And I remember getting there, and there was a point in marriage where, first year was, amazing. We were in honeymoon. But second year came through, and I was like, man, it just seems like she pushed every nerve that was titled anger. And it got to a point where, like, man, these were issues I hadn't dealt with. I had daddy issues as well. My dad left when I was 6. So we had to go to counseling and sit down with a counselor, and then they started uncovering some of these baggages that I felt if I had dealt with as a single person wouldn't have shown up in my marriage. Because the truth of the matter is, issues you don't deal with when you're single would show up in your marriage as a problem. Issues you don't address as a single person will definitely show up in your marriage, and then you blame your spouse. And don't figure out that it was you that had the problem all along. So there are certain things you have to deal with. There's the issue of forgiveness. Learning to forgive yourself, and then forgiving every other person that has let you go. It's one of the hardest things to do, but those are things where if you take it into your marriage, I mean, the devil just waits for it, waits for the right time, and he just activates it. It's like a Trojan horse, so to speak, where it's just there, it comes into the marriage with you, and once it's activated, it blows up out of proportion. But if you can deal with it in your single state, go to counseling. I think there's a stigma around going to counseling as people, and I'm like, no, God gave these people wisdom to be able to listen to us. So a lot of times, especially with our community, Nigerian community, we have this stigma where, oh, if you go to a counselor, you have problems. Yes, I have problems. Can I get it dealt with? So when you go there and you deal with those issues as a single person, I mean, you'll be walking into a marriage free. Did that answer your question?
Hi, thank you guys so much for hosting this conference. My name is Teju, and I had a question about marriage and single friends. So I have a couple of friends that have gotten married in college, and their view on having single friends is, well, my friend is the wife, and she says if my husband has a female friend, she's our friend, and he can't hang out with her one-on-one unless I'm there. She's very protective. Me being the person that I am, I'm very single, but I'm assuming that when I get married, I'll be protective over my husband, but I won't mind if he hangs out with his female friends alone. Obviously not under, after certain times, don't play games. But also me, I have a lot of male friends that might not be friends with my husband. Like, am I expected to cut them off? Or we can only hang out when my husband is around? Not saying I would mind that, of course, because I want my male friends to be friends with my husband, but does that automatically mean no single friends of the opposite sex unless we both like them?
I think it's more so a matter of how much time you're spending with them and having that open communication. Like, as long as my wife knows if I am going to meet with somebody of the opposite sex, she fully knows where I am, what time, how long, that full communication. So, yes, it's not a matter of cutting somebody off right away, because we don't do that naturally. But it's about setting those boundaries on the amount of time. And you'll naturally start to fade off how much time is being spent.
Yeah, and that's important. That's good. So it depends. So I'm a little crazy. So I had to get to a place. Like, honestly, I had to get to a place, and he had a lot of single friends, but they were really cool. Like, they were like brother, sister. Oh, okay, that's all cool. But once I got to know them, I got more comfortable. I'm like, okay, yeah, you can go out with Sean. Like, that's no problem. But however, he always included me. Like, hey, Britt, I'm going out with Sean. We got something to talk about or something like that. Like, but it's never. They're not going to like a club or a bar or anything like that, and I say absolutely not. But it literally depends on the person, what's the circumstance, because I wouldn't want him to cut off a sister or god sister that he's been close with for years, because I'm like, okay, no, completely. But like, they always include me. If they're texting, I'm in the group chat too as well. So it's really just about your own personal preference. And like I said, what we do in our marriage is going to be completely from when you get married. It's just really about having that open and honest communication. Like, my husband always includes me if he has to have a meeting or something with a woman a woman, period. And as long as I'm okay with it and we have a good communication, it works. But for me, I'm not hanging out with no man. That's just me. I didn't have male friends before marriage. Only male friends I had, they just wanted one thing from me. So I'm not hanging out with no man.
So I had a lot of I had more male friends than females or women as friends. Some of them were like family members. Some of them, I saw like brothers. But what I did is I made him comfortable with them. And if he felt for some reason that he wasn't really feeling that person, I had to respect that. Because a lot of times men see things in men that women don't see. Likewise, we see things in females in women that, guys don't see. So, for example, I work with, hundreds of people, and sometimes we go out to lunch. He knows all of my colleagues, male and female. So I have no problem going to lunch with James, for example, because he knows James, he's heard of James, he's probably even met James. Now, if he comes back and says, Yemisi, I'm not really feeling this James guy, I need not to go to lunch with James then. But if he's okay with it, that's fine. It's about what he's comfortable with. Likewise, in his other place of work, not where he's currently working now, but there was another place he worked at, that he was probably one of two guys in the whole office. So when they go out to lunch, I know where he's going. You know, I can pop up if I need to. You know, I'm just saying, like, I'm comfortable with him having some female friends. Now, there's a few that I'm like, no, we can't even go together. It's not going to be a 3 outing. It's going to be a no outing because I don't really like her. And I'm comfortable telling him that, and he's comfortable telling me that. And I think it needs to be, you need to be in a place where you're comfortable having those difficult conversations. And some people, you know, a lot of times, I think what the issue is not that they have intentions in the beginning, but over time, like you said, things start to develop. You start opening up yourself to this person. They start sharing themselves with you. You're starting to cross lines where you're not only friends, but now you're companions. You're going deeper and deeper into titles that is meant for your spouse and not your friend. And at that point, it becomes a problem. Some women can identify that from the jump, like that girl, 3 months, she's gonna be calling you after 9 o'clock. Some people, they don't. So there's something about women intuition. There's something about being comfortable enough with your spouse and being able to tell them what you're comfortable with. And if he respects you and he respects your role, he will put boundaries around that relationship, because sometimes you can't cut it off completely, especially if you work with the person. It's difficult.
And also to add to that, what was the genesis of that relationship? Was it a friends with benefits situation that you're still keeping, holding on to? Or was it a true, genuine friendship? For me, I knew as a single guy, I had some people that were my Rolodex, or what do we call it here? That were friends with benefits. They looked normal on the outside, but I knew what we were doing behind closed doors and what was in the back. So those kind of friendships, when I'm in a committed relationship and I'm deciding to live a certain way, those kind of friendships have to go. They're not bad people, but it's just, if this is going to cause me to stumble eventually, then what's the point of holding on to that friendship?
And I feel like you have to be mature enough in the relationship with being okay if she doesn't want me to be around somebody. Because I'd rather have my home happy than to try to establish that friendship outside the home.
So like I said, we've touched on a lot of great points. As we know now, the work starts before the marriage, not just when we're in the marriage. Like Pastor Wale said, it's okay to seek counsel before you need counsel. I see therapists once a week. There's nothing wrong with that, especially as a Nigerian. My parents were like, you know, you can talk to us about anything, but I can't talk to you about you. You understand? And there's certain traumas. It's true. There's certain traumas we have, certain unpacked issues that may stem from childhood, from our parents, from friendships, whether it be abandonment or what have you, that we need someone who's unbiased and a professional to give us an opinion before we go into that marriage. And again, like Yemisi said, Pastor Yemisi, there's power in prayer. The I Am Whole prose that I wrote that, and that came from a series I have in my journal called Dear Future Husband. And it's not just about what I want, whether it's 6 figures or a certain height requirement, but speaking life into him and getting patience, asking for patience, asking for understanding of that future spouse. So it's less about what you're looking from the spouse, but more about being whole in who you are. And so then you can have a complete product to deliver that future spouse. So again, whether it be praying with a group, praying by yourself, or journaling, there are ways in which you can communicate what you're looking for in a spiritual level that can be understood by God. So let's thank our panelists. Thank you so much. You guys have any final thoughts? No?
I guess my final thought would be that for singles, enjoy your singleness. A lot of times we're in a rush to get married, and it looks great on social media, and there's, you know, marriage is fantastic, but it's only fantastic when you're marrying the right person and when you're mature enough to handle the good and the bad that comes, well, not the bad, but the good and the truth that comes with marriage. So one of the things that I did when I was single, I enjoyed my singleness. Like, I did everything I wanted to do without someone over my shoulder breathing down my neck. So while marriage should be a goal for some people, I think it's important to maximize your single life, because there are some things that you're doing now that it'll be very difficult for you to do when you're married.
That's so important. So my advice, enjoy the season and don't compare. I know we're in a lot of group chats and a lot of friends are getting married and friends are getting engaged. actually just figure out like what is it that you actually want. What is it in this season of singleness that you're actually looking for, that you actually want God to help you with, and just stay away from that world of comparison. I know we live in millennials, we live on social media, we live in these group chats, but really just sometimes if you gotta fast from it, if you gotta unfollow somebody, if you gotta remove yourself from that group chat, you should really be focused on your inner self. You know, really focus on this and like, you know what, I'm not even gonna date anyone. I'm gonna really work on self. So when that guy or that man, young woman, young man does come along, I'm gonna be in position. I'm gonna be ready.
My final advice is know the difference between a yellow flag and a red flag in a relationship. Because a lot of us are probably cutting off people as soon as we see a yellow flag. It was just something, a yellow flag is pretty much, all right, I don't like that, but I can work through that. And a red flag is completely like non-negotiable, I cannot move forward. So don't be so quick to cut somebody off. Maybe God put you in their life to help them in that area of struggle, which is that yellow flag. So again, know those things that you can work with and those things that you just absolutely would not. Because if it's a red flag and you continue going that relationship, if it doesn't go well, you can't get mad at the person, get mad at yourself because God showed you those red flags.
Final words for me is I think everything everyone here has said. Commitment doesn't trump preparation, but preparation trumps commitment.
Another round of applause for our panelists.
When I was searching, your love was never far. You made a way to get to me.